Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. I managed to actually get home on time from my flight to set up a live stream today. I'm not feeling too jet lagged, so therefore I'm going to do a live stream. Do let me know if my audio is actually fine because this is my first time with my home setup and just wanted to make sure I have nothing kind of um, with any errors. So just let me know if the microphone works, and I think what we'll do is just answer any YouTube questions until the end of the deadline, really, because I've already set my transfers up. You can see on the screen it's Darwin, Mitrovic, James to Trent. Hey from Nepal, nice to meet you, Mayank. Hope you're doing well. It must be quite late in Nepal, right? Close to bedtime potentially. Maybe a little bit earlier for you as well, because I think this deadline's a little bit nicer than most, compared for people living outside of Europe. Hey Alan, hope you're doing well. Yeah, Jerome, haven't seen you around in a bit. I haven't actually been streaming either, so I recognize that's probably part of the problem. But nice to see you guys as well. Hope you're doing well. Um, so I've come back just from Hong Kong from a holiday there for a month. So I was covering World Cup Fantasy and a little bit of FPL in Hong Kong. Such a shame because it's so easy to miss games with the way fixtures are set up there. I was staying up until 3, 4 a.m. to watch most of the Premier League games, and I couldn't even get them legally because I usually would get them through Amazon Prime, but didn't actually get the subscription in Hong Kong because it's really expensive and I didn't really want to pay for it for 2 weeks worth of content. But yeah, World Cup was fun. Unfortunately, I still missed a lot of games in the World Cup because of the Hong Kong time. Try to make sure I stayed up for all the big knockout games, but then staying up for Spain was a bit of a pain because a lot of our games was 4 a.m. and things like that. I think what I might do is answer Twitter a little bit later today. But feel free, if you can kind of construct your question on YouTube, I'll probably answer the YouTube questions today. I'd rather have a little bit more of a chilled stream. But fortunately, yeah, of course, we will have time to do rate your team stuff as well. How to increase my FPL bank. Look, to be honest, I think we're halfway through the season, and most of my moves have actually been to decrease my bank because the reality is you want to get points now. You've already used technically your second wild card, so a lot of the initial value built in early in the season, that's already kind of been used up, right? Because you were kind of holding up money for that second wild card. What you can do, of course, is build for the future. So anytime you see someone prone to a price rise and you actually think that aligns with your team transfer strategy, then you could maybe jump the gun. But the value of actually making transfers before price rises and price falls is actually getting the information at the end of the deadline. Now, sometimes that might be terrible, right? Because think about if people owned Mitrovic in their Gameweek 17 draft, didn't get the Marco Silva news that he was a doubt, they probably kept Mitrovic in their team. So it works both ways. Sometimes some people feel that too much information actually makes them worse in FPL, but I think most of the time the reality is it does make you a better FPL player. So that's the kind of issue you have to deal with when you're going for price rises, when you're increasing the bank of your team. But you can go on a website such as fplstatistics.co.uk, and that will tell you every day which players are prone to a price rise and a price fall. And if you want to make transfers around that, you can steadily increase your bank, but I don't suggest it because just because you're chasing a price rise doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get points next week. Now, of course, if you went for Odegaard last week, you would have done well. But if you did Mitrovic last week, you would have done poorly because he got 0 points. So that's a good example. Rashford captain, I think Rashford captain is a fantastic idea. I think he might actually be a slightly better captain than Haaland. But Haaland's my vice anyways, and I don't think there's too much in it between them. If I look at my own team, if we're talking captaincies, I think I'd probably go Mitrovic, then I'd probably go Haaland, and then it would be Rashford, then Andreas, then Kepa in my team. No Salah and Darwin XG disrespecter. What do you mean? I've got them covered with Trent Alexander-Arnold. No, isn't that enough? Hope you're doing well, Con. All right, let's actually try to respond to some questions. So Jerome says, I challenge myself to not have Haaland for the entire season. Okay, Jerome. You lost motivation for FPL and it's entirely your fault. I mean, I think if you're going to do something as ambitious as that, I'd probably suggest you have a spreadsheet of a team in on paper that you'd have without Haaland, and then play FPL on a spreadsheet there. But then for your real team, please put Haaland in your team there. Should I transfer out Almiron for a double Arsenal midfield? No, I don't think so. I think Almiron's worth keeping in your team. I don't really think the issue as well is the only transfer I can see going down for Almiron is going to be Andreas this week, but that's going to be a one game week transfer. So Almiron's going to be back on basically perma play duty for anyone who owns Almiron. If you look at the fixtures that Trippier has, for example, Fulham, Crystal Palace, West Ham, I mean, you're going to be playing Almiron all those weeks. I don't think there's any issues with keeping Almiron in your team. What I would suggest is you might consider in the future to go for a 3-5-2 setup. So if we actually kind of look at that together, I think that could be worthwhile. Because if I was going to change my team up a little bit, what I would do is probably go out of Andreas, and then I'd probably go for Almiron. And then I'd probably downgrade Saka to Odegaard sometime in the near future. So I think something like this kind of template will be quite good. It really depends on whether Rashford stays in our teams and he continues this run of form. De Bruyne would probably be Salah if I'm being honest. I definitely made the wrong decision there. Definitely disrespected XG by going for De Bruyne, but unfortunately I haven't got any assists as well from De Bruyne, which is something I was banking on. But this would probably be the most template midfield that I can think of. If you're going for a 3-5-2 template, then obviously you've got money in the bank, that you can probably move out of Martial or Mitrovic. And then obviously, look, if Cancelo continues to start, let's say 1 out of 2 games, or if Pep simply has given up on him for whatever reason, because Rico Lewis is such a good player and he can play the inverted fullback role really well, then we've got more money saved there as well. So these two assets could be Greenwood, right? How much money would that save us? And if we go out of Cancelo, I mean, let's just say we go for Akanji, because I think a lot of people think Akanji's somewhat covers the City defense. But so this actually saves us a lot of money in the bank, and then we can probably make one more upgrade, because I think my defense looks pretty terrible there. I think Shaw is probably better than Patterson for like an objective team. And then obviously you can upgrade Mitrovic back into Darwin if you really feel like Darwin's popping, or you can just go back to some of the 8.x midfielders, right? You've got, I wouldn't say Almiron's actually worth going out of. I think his data is really good. Rashford is also starting to put on some serious numbers, has a potential double game week 20. You probably might only bench him in the Arsenal game. But look, I mean, he can score versus Arsenal. And then I think it's just about thinking whether you'd like to upgrade from Mitrovic, because the fixtures are pretty terrible from here. This is kind of the FPL, I would say, template for now. If I go, let's say, forecast the next 10 weeks, this is probably the team, maybe with Darwin, I would say. And I think that's how you'd go about it. The reality is most of the best midfielders in the game actually cost 6 million to 7 million. So there's no reason to actually spend more money than that. And then with the defense, I mean Newcastle are fantastic, right? And you've got enough coverage there. Ward's probably going to start to provide some more value for us because the fixtures are nicer for Leicester now. And then, as I said, with Cancelo now not being an option, I've already got Trent here, who's a bit of a outside differential premium. So you've got enough money in FPL to not chase price rises, in my opinion, and you should exclusively just go for players who are doing well, have good fixtures ahead. And frankly, most of them are going to be, look, these kind of 6.x players from Arsenal. If you drop White as well, I think you can easily go Saka as well. But I don't think Saka's that exceptional to have to force in your team. So yeah, those are my thoughts on team structure right now. We just go back to the YouTube comments though. Bench Foden or Martinelli? I'd probably bench Foden if I'm being honest. I've got no idea why Foden isn't starting consistent games. I mean, Pep obviously says it's more of a tactical thing because he thinks Grealish will get more passes in the system. But look, Foden looked extremely dangerous in the few minutes that he played in the Everton game. Probably could have actually had a one-on-one opportunity there, except for but for Seamus Coleman's really good tackle at the end. I would like to go for Foden, but it's also a really tough game in Chelsea, so I'd probably actually just stick with Martinelli and probably go with a shield pick there. He's playing Bournemouth. I think Rashford's a fantastic captain, 100% agree. Is benching Trippier not risky considering his EO? I mean, it's 100% risky, right? Because the people that I've actually put my bench have higher effective ownership. So in my opinion, let's say the 50-50s for many people this week are going to be White versus Trippier, and then also De Bruyne versus Martinelli, and I'm not even joking. Maybe you could actually say Saka, Martinelli, De Bruyne is the 50-50 itself because you don't really know who to pick from that. But I would say, yeah, I mean, I've dropped the two players in my team on paper who have the best projected numbers, I guess, in terms of Martinelli and Trippier. But I just think, I just look at points. This is going to be a tough game for Newcastle. They're probably going to lose their clean sheet. I still really like the look of an Arsenal team when Arteta keeps that full 11 on, especially with Partey and White. Whenever those two come out, I do think that things start to unravel. Tomiyasu has actually always looked like a very capable, serviceable backup, and potentially it's a bit of World Cup jet lag. Potentially it's because he's not been starting many games and he hasn't got enough fitness under him. But White, for me, makes the team a lot better as well. And part of that too is because Saliba actually allows him to play right back, and now they have a much more defensively minded team whilst also being able to operate with a much more capable on the ball player such as Zinchenko. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. I would actually just say that Arsenal have pretty good odds to get a clean sheet, and that's actually backed up by the gambling statistics as well. Cuckoo plus Mitro or Azpilicueta plus Havertz. Look, I think I would say Cucurella plus Mitrovic. And the only reason why is because I think Havertz is an issue because his price point is weird. You'd probably want to take away that money anyways from Havertz. I think he's less he has less permanence in your team, especially if he continues to do it poorly. One of the issues I find with Havertz always is he's 1 or 2 games away from getting benched, whereas Mitrovic, you don't have that issue. Okay, fine. Yes, we have the doubts over his fitness and whether he can actually recover for games substantially well, but Fulham also don't really have any replacements that are at his level, and I think they'll play him whenever possible. And I think when it comes down to Cucurella plus Azpilicueta, there's nothing between them. So you could actually go Azpilicueta plus Mitro, save that money, and actually do something else for your team. Should I transfer out Kane to replace Almiron for KDB for Game Week 20? You can't do that now, my friend, because that double Game Week fixture on 20 where it says City's going to play versus Tottenham isn't actually 100% confirmed. What happens is that both City and Tottenham will have cup fixtures after this deadline. And if any of these two teams kind of bottle it, so to speak, and they don't win the games decisively, or if there's a replay of the games that is necessitated by a draw as a final result for those two games, then you will actually have a situation where that double game week will probably be voided, as per Ben Crellin's suggestion. So any transfers geared towards double game week 20, I think shouldn't be executed this week. You should probably be thinking about only making those transfers when game week 20's deadline rolls around. So I wouldn't do it at -4 targeting game week 20 at all for now. Does Trippier's EO impact your views on benching him? It does 100%. Like it's the question of whether you want to play defensively or offensively in FPL, because look, the reality is you know roughly what most people's teams are. The most meta picks are going to be teams that have, or at least in the higher ranks, it seems like a construction of Kane plus Salah, plus Mitrovic, probably Andreas, Trippier, Kepa, Rashford is going to be the template team. Like these are the picks with the highest amount of effective ownership that you'll have to be dealing with this week. And I don't, and also and Martinelli as well. But I'm going to be, and also Almiron obviously, but I will be not having Almiron. I'll be benching Martinelli and I'll be benching Trippier. So yeah, I mean, you can see I've clearly gone for a very offensive team. And the idea is I'm taking a lot of risks, but I think I've gone for the picks that I think will deliver the best this week. So those are kind of my thoughts. I think Saka's done incredibly well in the big games this season. You can actually see that in the Liverpool game and the Tottenham game as well. Didn't actually do well in the Tottenham game, but they definitely did well in the Liverpool game. I just think he in one of these kind of testier fixtures, you might see a penalty as well sometimes because that's the difference. So yeah, I kind of like Saka this week more than Martinelli from that point of view. Martinelli probably the more creative player. We are now seeing that Saka is playing a much more offensive role. He could have got 2 goals if Martinelli decided to assist him. It's a tough situation. I think if I had Odegaard, I'd probably play him above both because he's actually racking up so many bonus points. And Saka is a little bit quiet on that sense, but he is actually trying to be he is now getting into more positions where he is the last man, so I do like that from Saka. And then I think with Trippier, as I said, a lot of people are going to disagree because they're going to think Trippier has much better offensive potential, and that's true. But I think the clean sheet potential of Arsenal is definitely there compared to Newcastle. So those are kind of my thoughts. And I think the big thing with Newcastle for me is this team is creating a lot of chances, but I think there's a clear issue with Wilson not being fully fit, and then Wood is obviously a huge downgrade from him when fit. Notorious, thank you so much for the donation. Happy New Year to you, to you as well, brother. Look, I think benching White is very aggressive. If you wanted to be safe, if you don't want to lose rank, I would probably bench White. I have benched Trippier because I really want to try jump up in ranks, and I do believe Arsenal will keep a clean sheet. And I think White's not someone who's completely unable to get offensive creation going. He's still perfectly capable of assisting completely random opportunities from Arsenal. I do think Arsenal will dominate more of the ball as well. So those are kind of my thoughts. Going to give Martial and Darwin another week. Yeah, that's totally fine. And not get Mitrovic, hold the transfer. That's fine. So the reason why you want to hold the transfer this week, if you don't have a very, very spicy move like me lined up. So I've gone for Darwin out to Mitrovic as a captaincy. Then I've gone for James to Trent. And the reason why that works for me, because as a 2 free transfer, I get to upgrade James, right? Whereas if I only had 1 free transfer, my only options are really to go towards Shaw. But if you have the ability, let's say with 2 free transfers, to go for a simple move, and you don't think that this game week has enough of a high potential, or you're not really confident in someone like Trent, so there's no upside in actually utilizing your double free transfer like so, then I think it actually makes a lot of sense to roll this week, because rolling this week will allow you to get the data from the subsequent weeks. I'm not really sure what's going on with my background. Something wrong with my green screen. Let me try to fix that. I'm just going to put myself towards the side so you guys don't have to deal with that for now. Thank you so much, Notorious. But yeah, as I said, it's whether you want to go offensive or not. The sun is actually setting, and I don't really have curtains in my new house, so I apologize for that. There's nothing I can really do about that. I think Rashford captaincy is perfectly fine. I don't even like Mount. I think, look, people are going to... If you were looking at FPL alerts and you're just simply looking at goals and assists, you'll see that Mount scored in the Bournemouth game. But he's still operating a relatively inoffensive role in the team. He's much more of a creative player, someone who is part of that kind of midfield system. I can't really see too much of the value of going for Mount as a captaincy option. I think he's got a pretty low ceiling. If you wanted to go for a Chelsea attacker, I would really only advise going for Sterling as a captaincy, and that's pretty much it. Why Martial over Nunez? Because I wanted to go for Trent Alexander-Arnold. So if I went Martial into Mitrovic, then I couldn't do that. Cancelo or Cucurella? I would probably start Cancelo. I mean, oof, it's actually tough. No, I'd probably start Cucurella, sorry. That's incorrect for me. I'd probably bench Cancelo if those are your 2 choices. Kulu and Greenwood for a -4 if it means going Mitro and Andreas/Trossard. Trossard, I think, is a terrible pick right now. I think he's too expensive. Mitrovic, FOMO, I think, is a genuine question. You could go for Mitrovic. Foden or Kulu start. All right, first of all, hello, Hugo. But second of all, I mean, we don't even know what's going on with Kulusevski and his injury situation, right? Unless I'm mistaken. Yeah, it seems like so Kulusevski is set for a scan, so we have no idea what's going on with him. So I'd probably just start Foden. If you have Darwin to Mitchell for 1 week, I think that's a good enough 1 free transfer where you can save the next free transfer for planning ahead, because we might have double game week 20, we might have double game week 21. So saving your transfer is actually not a bad idea. Any recommendations for who to bring in for Almiron? Look, why are you specifically looking at someone to bring in for Almiron? I'm just curious, because I think Almiron's perfectly worth keeping your team. Do I advise starting White over Trippier? No, I think it's a 50-50. It's up to you. I just want to go a little bit more offensive and just go for Ben White to start. Would you start Walker over White or Trippier? Yeah, I'd probably start Walker, right? Because I can't see Walker coming on as a substitute, so I do actually like that. Yeah, I think that makes sense as a move. Martial to Mitrovic, I think, is also a good move. Would you start Walker? Sorry, I already read that question. Sterling or Salah captain? I'd probably go for Sterling. Struggling to find space for Andreas. Can't figure out if I should bench KDB, Martinelli, Darwin. Ooh, that's tough. I see you have Martinelli bench, but I don't have another Arsenal player like you. I might bench KDB there, Blair. Um, and Notorious. I'm planning to use my triple captain in the future, so it's going to be in the kind of double game week 28, 29 area. So similar to last season, where you'll see a lot of huge double game weeks in the back half of the season. Because what happens is, as we go deeper into the FA Cup, there's going to be some kind of replay scheduled, and then there's going to be double game weeks as well. So that's something we need to account for. I'm just gonna keep my green screen like this, and you can see my face while you can still see that silly little green in the corner. But yeah, I think that's my plans in terms of the triple captain. I'm not going to use that in the near future. I think, especially in the blank game week in 25, I wouldn't use a free hit there either, and actually save your chips to the back half of the season. Worth bringing in Azpilicueta or just play Cancelo? I'd probably just play Cancelo. But it depends on who's on your bench, right? Because I think this is one week where I'm actually kind of happy where if Cancelo doesn't play, Patterson comes on for me. Yes, it doesn't really look any good when a team gets to face Brighton, because Brighton's an exceptionally good team at scoring, specifically in any scenario versus any opponent. But I think Everton, the way they play, decent chances at least at home. Trippier on the bench. Look, I've done it. It doesn't mean you have to do it. You can go for White on the bench as well, if you guys are thinking about that. Would I start Martinelli over Nunez? No, I would start Darwin 100% over Martinelli. Martinelli or Trippier already have Saka and White. I'd start Martinelli as well. Same situation. I mean that because you can see my bench order, right? I've gone for Martinelli and then I've gone for Trippier. Yeah. As in your first bench is Trippier, not Patterson. Yeah, exactly. I've got Trippier. You can see Trippier comes ahead of Patterson. But I mean, my logic is, let's say for someone who doesn't have that many defensive options, because I brought in a defender and Trent, so I'm assuming that this person might have, maybe still has James in their team or something like that. Worst case scenario. Bench Martinelli, Saka, or Darwin. Pink tiers. Okay. Look, I'd probably bench Martinelli there. Rashford captain, but Mount does have the double game week. Yeah, I know, but I think Rashford versus Bournemouth is probably as good as a double game week fixture, especially if your second game week is going to be Manchester City. Hey, Fran, Martial to Mitro. If you've already answered it, please could you repeat in short? Yeah, I think that's a great move, frankly. I would definitely execute that move. Because from the predictions that I'm seeing, it seems like the odds that people place on Mitrovic getting a yellow card is something like 20 to 30% in the Leicester game, which means you've got probably an 80% chance of Mitrovic playing the double game week. And he gets to play Leicester first, so the value there is really incredibly high. And then when you compare it to Martial, that's probably 65 minutes, 70 minutes versus Bournemouth. The one thing about Martial that a lot of people don't recognize, I think, is that Man United don't actually have too much depth. So it's actually Garnacho who probably comes in, and then a structure change where probably Rashford goes up top. What we saw in the previous match with Rashford being disciplinarily benched was actually that Rashford comes in for Garnacho, and actually they just play their usual starting formation. But because I think Martial and Rashford will both start, what we're going to see is Martial being subbed off at 70 minutes, Rashford pushing into a kind of false striker position, I suppose, where he gets to probably shift left once again. So I do like the idea of Martial to Mitrovic, as long as you're not taking a hit. Trent aside, who else to go for James' replacement? Having 2 7 mil defense. I mean, look, the reality is, Connor, we're probably going to be going out of Cancelo soon, because I haven't seen any positive news about Cancelo, and the fact that he's been benched twice is already disgusting to me as a Cancelo owner. I'd like to go out of Cancelo as soon as possible. The only thing that's holding me back is there's a high chance City still have a double game week 20, which means I should probably keep Cancelo and then actually bin Cancelo off after that. Because if, let's say, Cancelo only plays one of the double game week 20 matches, that already tells us he just doesn't hold value in our team as a 7.x asset. So therefore, we just go out of Cancelo and then play around that, I think. And therefore, you'd have much more money back. So I think in terms of the alternative replacements to James, I think the priority is going for Shaw, because Shaw has double game week 20 as a probably 55% chance. And then worst case is if you have enough depth, and that's the key issue. If you have enough depth, I think Shaw is still a good transfer this week, because he still has to play, unfortunately, two very, very tough games in terms of Man City and Arsenal. If you have enough depth for Shaw, then you can actually just simply keep him for the rest of the season, because it seems like he's either going to play left center back or left back for the rest of the games, and he's nailed, right? Who would you bring in Havertz for Darwin? No, I don't. I don't really like that transfer. I actually really like Darwin still. The only reason why I've gone Darwin to Mitrovic is because I prefer Mitrovic to Havertz as well, and I think I would actually quite comfortably captain Mitrovic. If I had the chance to probably go for a Sterling move, I would say that's the best Chelsea punt attacker-wise to go as a captaincy. So, Biswanath, I think your question on Sterling versus Mount, I probably just answered that as well. I would go for Sterling 100%. Is benching Almiron and Trippier too risky? I mean, it really just depends, right? This is how FPL works. You can either pick picks who are 70 to 80% effective ownership, and you can have very, very slow, steady rises towards the top. Or in some weeks like this, where you have a mirror matchup between Arsenal and Newcastle, where a lot of people own assets from both teams, you can either try take a balanced approach and probably go for Trippier and Martinelli, which is the usual kind of, I would say, ownership pairing in the game, or you can go for something like going for White ahead of Trippier, hoping that Arsenal have a good result and actually build on what is actually a very strong defensive base. Because yes, okay, Newcastle and Arsenal, both I would say top four offenses and defenses in the league, but Arsenal at home, very, very good results, very, very good numbers, especially for goals, expected goals. And then with Newcastle, yes, okay, they have fantastic defensive numbers. They've only conceded 11 goals this season, but if you're ever going to expect them to concede a goal, I think Arsenal at home is actually a very, very fair shout. So that's Trippier's ceiling already capped off by whether he can get bonus points and probably an assist in open play whilst losing a clean sheet. And then with White, I think decent chance of clean sheet, much less chances of getting something in open play, but he's not terrible. And I don't know if you've been watching White this season, but he's perfectly capable of getting bonus points himself. Because if you look at something like Luke Shaw, who's gotten triple bonus points in the previous game by just playing left center back, it's very evident you don't have to play in a very offensive manner to get bonus points. The big difference with Trippier is he's able to do both, and he delivers something like 3 big chances in let's say 15 minutes in the first half. But I don't think you're going to get that versus Arsenal, because Arsenal is a very, very solid team. And with Partey playing this game, hopefully 90 minutes, I can see Arsenal getting a clean sheet, or at least hopefully White being subbed off at something that's not 59 minutes. I think you're making a mistake going Darwin to Martial instead of Martial to Darwin. No Liverpool cover is absolute suicide. The best attack stats in PL at the moment. I think long term, what we have to think about is Darwin and Salah are very expensive. I probably will go to Salah anyways. Yes, this is quite, I think, worrisome to go Darwin versus Brentford without Darwin. But Martial versus Bournemouth, I think, is a much better opportunity to get points relative to the price that they're at. Because you have to think, the only way I can get Trent in this team is by going out of Darwin. And then the replacement of Darwin is therefore Mitrovic this week, who I think probably has better odds of scoring than Darwin. And then when we look at Trent, huge upside, I would say, versus Brentford now that Tony's out. And then when we look across towards Martial, what's interesting for me is, as I said, this is Martial's best fixture. He's cheap, and I could probably move into a 3-5-2 system. So whilst I agree that Darwin is probably a better pick than Martial this week, you have to consider the price of Darwin, in my opinion. And that's kind of why I've gone out of Darwin into Trent. And I'll probably cover Liverpool's attack a little bit more decisively in the future by going De Bruyne to Salah, something like Gameweek 21. But yeah, it's of course going to be a problem not going for Darwin this week. I don't think Darwin is by any means a terrible pick. I love Darwin. And I've gone for Darwin even before Game Week 17, if you've been following me. So I think FPL at the end of the day, you're going to have sacrifices. So this is the sacrifice I've made to go for Mitrovic captaincy, and then getting a lot of value out of a double free transfer opportunity here in 19. So that's why I've gone for that. I wouldn't say it's suicide either, because I don't think Darwin's effective ownership is that high. I got Nketiah and bench boost on with Andreas. Is Mitrovic still vital to bring in? Probably, yeah. I'm not captaining Haaland, but I think if you want to go safe, you can captain Haaland. But if you're going for a bench boost, you seem to be going for quite an offensive strategy, so why not try Mitrovic, who seems to have the best expected value? What do I think about Andreas captain? I think it's perfectly fine. I don't think you like this, but I'm going to roll and play 3 of Trippier, Cancelo, Bueno, and Ben White. I don't like any defender. I think that's fine, Adam. Because one of the issues with Shaw, of course, is coverage of the next few weeks. You promise you won't spam, but you're going to totally spam. You have Mitro, Darwin, and Haaland up front, and you have Andreas, Martinelli, Saka, De Bruyne, and Rashford for the bench. Just bench Martinelli. Sorry, I'm gonna have to put you on a timeout just because you are spamming. So Nketiah for Mitro. Whoa, what do you mean by Nketiah for Mitro? Are you taking Nketiah out of your team for Mitro? Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I would probably do that. What should you do with Kulusevski? I'd probably move him to Odegaard if you can. I think any midfield pick to Odegaard is fantastic right now. I put him on a timeout, but I don't really want to ban him for now because I think he's probably just a young kid. Yeah, I think it does make sense, Oscar. Pick 2 to start out of White, Walker, Trippier. I'd probably go Walker and White. Play Castagna or White. I'd actually probably play Castagna. Planning on captaining Rashford over Mitrovic. I think that's a good pick. Rashford is a pretty good pick this week. Maybe Rashford is actually a better pick than Haaland as well. I mean, I don't really care about my vice captaincy this week because clearly I've gone for Mitrovic, and hopefully he's going to play some minutes. So I don't think there's much of a consideration for vice captaincy this week for me. Martial or Darwin? I think I prefer Darwin as a pick than Martial. But if I had to go, if it was one free transfer, I'd probably go to Martial first. So yeah. Already have Saka and Martinelli, so maybe looking to swap Kulu for Mount or Andreas. Okay, I see what you mean. I don't really like Mount that much, so I'd probably just go for Andreas. Dean over Cancelo. I think Dean over Cancelo is a great pick. Aston Villa look very good. Aston Villa's fixtures are very, very good as well. Next 4. John Stones. You could start him. No guarantees that he'll start, though. I have Martial and will probably move to Mitro, but I don't really want him beyond this week. I'd rather pivot to 3-5-2. I guess it depends, Stefan. Like, do you have 1 free transfer, 2 free transfer? Because I think if you maybe just captaining Rashford is actually good enough because it's such a good pick. You have 1 free transfer, thinking of saving it for Salah next game week, or should I use it? Why are you thinking of Salah next game week? I guess you're a KDB owner, but maybe KDB has double game week 20 now. Bueno or Ben White? I'd probably advise on going for... I'm actually not sure who Wolves are playing. I seem to have forgotten. Apologies about that. Oh, right, sorry, they're playing Aston Villa. Yeah, I'd actually probably go for... I'd probably go for Ben White. What do you think of free hit team? I probably wouldn't go for a free hit. There's going to be really, really good double game weeks in the future. You'll get probably a green arrow this week by playing a free hit, but is it worthwhile in terms of the overall amount of points you're going to get this season? I think it's probably not. So my lesson learned my first year playing FPL was free hitting in kind of blank game week weeks or very, very small double game week weeks aren't worthwhile. You have huge double game weeks always, pretty much every year, and especially this year with the Queen's death and some of the postponements that we've had that are a little bit unnatural. You're just going to get larger double game weeks later down the season. So in my opinion, yeah, I would save your free hit. I wouldn't use it this week. I think, Stefan, yeah, if you've got 1 free transfer, I'd probably look at captaining someone else, and maybe you can skip the Mitrovic transfer if you want to go 3-5-2 as well, because 2 free transfers will actually be very powerful for you in the next week. Hi, Fran, what do we do with Foden if you have him? I think you play him this week because I don't think Pep has said anything specifically about him that is very damaging towards Foden and his ability to play for the City team and start in the future. It seems to be very tactical, whereas with Rico Lewis, I think you could argue he's very, very high on Rico Lewis, maybe more so higher on Rico Lewis than he is higher on Grealish compared to Foden. But I like the chances of keeping Foden in your team because of the potential value of a double game week 20 for City. And that Foden will hopefully feature in those games. Alternatively, if you can just simply go towards Odegaard, I think then that's probably the way to go out of Phil Foden. If you can go Foden to Sterling as well with one free transfer, I also think that's incredibly powerful. But I wouldn't really be thinking about Foden to Mount because I don't see the ceiling with Mount. Yes, maybe he does well in the Fulham game, but over the course of the next few game weeks, I don't really like Mount that much. What would you do with Robertson? It's a tough one, actually. I'd probably hold because it seems like actually Klopp's press conference comments on Robertson's injury seems to be quite positive, so I'd probably hold. You have Bruno. What do you suggest with him? I'd play. I mean, I would just play him this week. He's first Bournemouth, fantastic fixture. Then I'd probably move Bruno out into something like Odegaard or a cheaper midfielder. Remember that we have a lot of value in the midfield in the next few weeks, specifically if, let's say, Brighton get a double game week fixture. If I just show you guys now, I mean, I've got enough money in the bank to go for something like Mitoma, right? I think Mitoma is like an exceptional pick if you want to go and capture a little bit of Brighton punt potential through the attackers. We just saw Trossard get a very, very low minute game because he didn't play particularly well, and Mitoma is actually getting a lot of shots on target as well for this Brighton team, and he's getting very, very consistent minutes. You can see him slowly ramping up. This is not illustrated here, but there was actually a previous fixture where he also scored a goal versus Arsenal in one of the cup matches. So this is Mitoma. I think he's really interesting. If you kind of want to stay within a very flexible structure and you're kind of looking to make a one free transfer move away from Andreas and you want to cover Brighton, I think that's the easiest way to do it if you have a little bit of money in the bank. I think that's an exceptional move, and Mitoma can be a very, very flexible piece in your team if you want to continue with the 3-4-3 structure. If you want to continue 3-5-2, I still think you can probably go for Mitoma. Because we mentioned that we're probably going to be going out of Cancelo, going out of Saka into Odegaard if we don't go out of White first. So those are options too. So those are kind of my overall plans. Bench Martial or Martinelli. I'd probably bench Martinelli. I think Martial just simply has a much better fixture. Cancelo to Trent. I like that free transfer. Yeah, it really depends on whether you have Mitrovic and you have, or you feel like you've covered double game week 19 substantially enough. By the way, guys, thank you guys so much for joining the live stream. If you guys could like the video and also subscribe, that'd be really appreciated. I usually run a cheat sheet series every week, so that's kind of an update of all the picks in FPL and the different price points. And then I'm also going to be adding expected points into the cheat sheet, so that should hopefully increase the utility of the cheat sheet for you guys in the future. Then, of course, I have my team selection videos as well. And when I have more time or when the game weeks are probably a little bit more stretched out like they will be this week, then I'll have probably time to do a review video and also preview videos in the future. So that's going to be my plans for FPL content in the future. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hey, Fran, what do you think of using 2 free transfers to get Shaw and Mitchell for Martial and Reese? I think those are fantastic transfers. And that was actually one consideration of mine. But I think one of the issues with Shaw and Mitchell is, first of all, it locks you into Shaw, who has 2 really tough fixtures in the next 2 weeks, even if he gets a double game week in 20. But I like Shaw long term anyways. So and maybe going out of Martial probably gets rid of the situation where Martial is only someone who's permanently going to play 60 to 65 minutes a game. But Mitchell also has some pretty tough fixtures. So I think the reason why I've gone for Trent, for example, here is I like the coverage of Liverpool. I also like his fixtures anyways. Whereas with both Shaw and Mitrovic, you could argue that their short-term fixtures are poor, specifically on 20 and 21. Because Mitrovic, as you can see, has to play Newcastle and Tottenham. I would say very, very tough matches. Maybe Tottenham not so much, if we're being honest. And then he has to play Chelsea again. So that's an interesting situation where I would suggest that Mitrovic is probably a move worth using, but maybe Shaw not so much. Because, as we said, the issue with the cup fixtures and our understanding of future double game weeks in the short term is that it all depends on a lot of cup games that will actually happen post this deadline. So a lot of our understanding of double game weeks will dramatically change after this deadline. So that's why it might be worthwhile for you guys, unless you're going for a very ambitious transfer like myself, where I'm going for Trent this week, to actually roll one of your transfers this week. Can't do Martial to Mitchell straight, not enough money in the bank. Yeah, that's probably why I'd skip it. Martial to Mitchell and... Oof, okay, fine. Martial to Mitchell and Foden to Odegaard is actually a very lovely two-piece move, so I would definitely go for that. Thoughts on Sterling? I think probably the second best captaincy punt this week. Fantastic punt. Is Nunez to Mitrovic a good move? I think so. I think the chances of Mitrovic actually playing the Chelsea game is something like 70 to 80% based on bookies' odds of him getting suspended in the Leicester match. So the value of Mitrovic is actually very high this week, regardless. We've been talking about 4 yellow cards for a long time. Let's be honest, none of the players who've been on 4 yellow cards have gotten any closer to 5 yellow cards. Players are obviously acutely aware of how many suspensions are looming in the distance for them. So that's the reality, right? We haven't seen Saliba get a yellow card. We haven't seen Mitrovic get a yellow card. We haven't seen Kane get a yellow card, and so on and so forth. Saka, of course, now is on suspension, on a bit of a suspension tightrope, but I think he'll also probably evade it as well. So that's the reality. Sell Darwin to Gakpo. I don't tap down. I would actually wait a while, because I think what's going to happen is Gakpo's probably going to come in a little bit later in this Brentford game, but I don't think he's going to start. So if you jump the gun by going for Gakpo before he actually has kind of locked down the minutes in this team, I would say that's probably detrimental to you, because I think you'd be jumping the gun there. I would actually wait for him to lock down a starting spot in this team and hopefully start to play well with this Liverpool team, because there's going to be a bit of a gelling process as well. Not every player who joins Liverpool integrates as well as Mo Salah does on his first season. So I think there could be some growing pains, and maybe if you could evade that first, that would be beneficial for you, because I can't see the immediate need to rush into Gakpo. Would you do Patterson to Shaw or Martial to Mitchell? Ooh, actually, I quite like Patterson to Shaw this week. Because I still think Martial has a fantastic fixture. And if Shaw is actually someone who can actually enable you to get a lot of points, I actually quite like that move. He can't play today. He's not registered yet. Okay, that's my bad, actually. I thought Gakpo was actually registered in time. If Mitrovic gets a yellow in the first game, will he miss the second one? Yes, he will miss the second one, Soldier Boy. But as I said, the chances of him actually getting a yellow card in the first game versus Leicester seem to be quite low. And a lot of players on 4 yellow cards just simply haven't accumulated those 5 ones, except for, I think, Madison. Yeah. Please convince me why I shouldn't captain Andreas. Mitchell could miss a pen or get yellow carded. Rashford the alternative. I mean, I'm not going to convince you why otherwise. I just think that Mitrovic is still capable of playing both games. First of all, I think we talked about how he's been on a 4 yellow card type rope for a while, has evaded it the last 2 games. Can't see why he would not evade that versus Leicester. This Leicester defense isn't that promising anyways. In terms of Andreas, he's been a little bit fluky to actually get most of his goals. I think, of course, we see the value of Andreas' assists, but the ceiling isn't that high. What you'll probably get from Andreas, though, is very consistent 2 points, because, of course, he doesn't have the suspension situation. But I think Mitrovic, the argument for him is he's got a much higher ceiling than Andreas, whereas Andreas is probably the safer play. So I would actually suggest that Rashford and Mitrovic are very similar, where you're probably going for the higher, more explosive pick there, and then Andreas is the safer pick. So if you want to go safer with your captaincy, I think Andreas is interesting, because it seems like he's got at least a little bit of a baseline of 6 points, right? Whereas with Rashford and Mitrovic, they could probably get 2 points, or they could get something like 15, 20. Andreas, obviously, on a good double game week, could probably get 10. But is he going to score a goal? I think with his level of finishing, quality of finishing, probably not something that I'm expecting. Could you make a quick fantasy team? Yeah, just in terms of like a template team, right? Yeah, we could actually do that right now. We've got a bit of time. About to make a fantasy team now. I'd probably drop Cancelo. I'd drop Patterson. I'd go into Shaw. I might drop White as well. I'd probably go... Maybe I'd keep White, actually. I go Odegaard. I might go Gabriel, actually. Change my mind on that. It's tough. I don't really want to go Ederson as a keeper, but I think I might have to do it. Alternative is going to be Akanji. Let's just use him as a placeholder. I think I'd go out of Martial. I'd probably keep Mitrovic. Ooh, maybe I would go... I guess I'd keep Mitrovic for now, knowing that I'm going to upgrade him in the future. I kind of like a 3-5-2 system. So this, for me, with Salah in this team, is going to be a future template, I would say. You can upgrade, obviously, all these positions, specifically the second keeper, and then obviously Mitrovic as well. Because I think you can go from Mitrovic to Darwin, but Mitrovic just has so much value. If you asked me to build a team this week, I would obviously just go for this kind of 3-5-2 structure here, and then just play this team as it is. But then if I was going to upgrade in the future, I'd probably go into Mitoma, or Almiron after this week, because they both have very interesting fixtures. Almiron specifically in single game weeks, but then Mitoma has doubles. And then Mitrovic would probably be an upgrade to Darwin. One of the issues with this team, I guess, is you don't have coverage of Kane, but fortunately Tottenham look pretty terrible. There's also a consideration to maybe go for an Aston Villa player, because Aston Villa have some really good fixtures. So if you wanted to skip Akanji, I guess you could just go Luca Dean as well. I mean, these 4 fixtures for Aston Villa seem really, really good in the short term. It's a tough one here. Shaw is someone that you probably want to go for later. But if I had to build a team today, I'd probably include him in this team. This team has only one Chelsea player, but I think that's totally fine, because ultimately their second game week fixture is versus City. So, sorry, if I just replace Darwin with Mitrovic, this is kind of what my free hit team would be like. Something like that. Not Almiron, but Andreas instead, and then just going 3-5-2. I'd probably play, Alexander-Arnold and Shaw, and then play Dean this week, and then I'd go for Kepa as my keeper. Or you can go for a Chelsea player, of course, on a free hit week, something like FPL GW19. So that's the potential team. It seems like Ruben Loftus-Cheek is available, so maybe you would go for Cucurella for safety. So that's a free hit team, but then I don't really like double Chelsea defense long term, so that's why I've suggested Dean, because he's got good short term fixtures, and it is playable after this week. Whereas with Cucurella, I mean, you've got Liverpool in the distance, and also might not even be on the team full time because of the impacts of Lewis Hall and Chilwell coming back. So that's kind of my thoughts on FPL. It's a little bit tricky in this circumstance, but I think a 3-5-2 is slowly starting to be the better template, because there's so many good midfield picks to pick from. And then what I like about saving money with this team structure is, let's say if Gakpo starts to play well, or if Foden starts to play in the team consistently again, then you can just simply upgrade one of these players into Foden. That's probably going to be coming out of Rashford, but it depends, because as soon as Rashford is done with 20 and 21 being tough games, you can probably keep him in your team forever. Whereas with Martial, I probably wouldn't be that confident in doubling up on Manchester United after a double game week. After the match versus Bournemouth. So that's the tricky situation there with United. Darwin out for Watkins. I wouldn't do that. I'd probably keep Darwin, because it's not like Watkins has a lot of double game weeks on the horizon for him. Is there anyone worth a -4 for Chelsea? If you wanted to -4 for a Chelsea asset, I'd probably go for Sterling. But is it worthwhile to -4? Probably not. Which teams have best 6 to 7 game weeks? I think Arsenal, just because they have doubles in the distance, even though they seemingly have tough games. I think City as well. Unfortunately, I'm sort of just naming all the big teams. This is kind of sad, but that's the reality, right? Because Liverpool probably have a double game fixture. And then I have to include Brighton. So you can go for someone like Dunk as well, who I actually omitted in my team selection, but you can go for players like Mitoma as well. And yeah, that's it, I would say. Because I think Chelsea, most of their good fixtures have come and gone after this week. And the value of a Chelsea asset isn't that high after this one. Whereas Arsenal seem to be very consistent. Newcastle, you have to include them in your team as well, because their numbers are so great. And first of all, after this Arsenal game, their fixtures are actually really, really clean. So that's the thing. Which with City is actually getting really hard to actually pick an asset outside of Holland, right? Where he has fixture proofness. Whereas with De Bruyne, I would say high highs, low lows right now with him, and then Cancelo doesn't even play consistently, which is the whole appeal of Cancelo at 7.3 or 7.2, whatever his price is. Darwin going to start? I would say Darwin's going to start. It seems like someone has already mentioned in the chat that Gakpo's not going to start. Maybe Firmino will come back on. I don't know what his progress in terms of recovering from his injury is. Dean versus me. I'd probably go for Luka Dean this week. Captain Salah viable option 100%. I think Salah might be probably a top 3 captaincy option this week. Foden / Zaha to Gakpo. I'm not going to Gakpo. Don't go to Gakpo now. Play Trossard or Bruno. Play Bruno 100%. 100% Bruno. I think Bournemouth are probably the easiest team right now to get points versus, whether you're a defender or whether you're an attacker. So I would definitely play anyone who gets to play versus Bournemouth. How about Dean versus Dunk? I would still pick Dean. Because this Brighton team haven't been that good defensively, whereas I have a lot of faith in Emery and his ability to kind of create a low block as well. So yeah, I would 100% go for Dean. He also has probably more attacking potential than Dunk. Start Cancelo or White? I'd start Cancelo. Do you see Gakpo doing well in 2 to 3 game weeks time? Sure, but not this week. Martial to Mitrovic worth it? I would say so. Rashford or Haaland captain? I'd probably go for Rashford. Because I kind of like punting against Haaland this week. I've just put Haaland there as vice captain because it doesn't actually matter. I'm probably going to get Mitrovic playing. What about Perraud or Bruno? I would 100% play Bruno still. Martial or Tony? I would go for Martial because Tony might not be playing football soon. First of all, Tony has a little bit of injury situation, and then also he's got a pickle with his FA charge details coming out. Have we actually got an updated news on Tony? I'm not actually sure if that came out today, because that was the expectation that Tony, the verdict on his kind of FA charge would come out today. Yeah, it doesn't seem like we actually got an update on that. How come Martial over Martinelli? I just think it's the matchup, right? Newcastle, a top 3, top 2 defense, you can even say. Specifically, when you look at underlying data, they're top 3. When they're looking at just purely goals conceded, Newcastle's top 1. And then Martial gets to play versus Bournemouth. So 65 minutes of Martial is something that I'd be quite confident in getting points from over Martinelli in 90 minutes versus Newcastle. Just the level of the opponents really is why I've done that. Mount or Odegaard? I would say Odegaard, because even though Mount has probably better expected value than Odegaard this week, the value of Odegaard is actually keeping him beyond this week. What this Arsenal team have shown is that they're very capable of scoring in most of their matches. They have good double game weeks coming up, and I prefer it over Mount, who has a double game week versus City. Take out Kane and bring in Mitro? Ooh, that's a tough one. I'd probably not do that. I think Kane's... Because that's basically asking you to break your team structure up, right? And maybe a little bit of hold-up value in Kane. I'm not sure if I'd go out of Kane, because I think he's still fantastic. What's my reason for starting Martial and benching Martinelli? Yeah. I mean, this is the sort of discussion that I made there. It's a tough one, though. I mean, Martinelli on my bench. I would love to consider maybe going for De Bruyne on my bench, so I can play Martinelli. That would give me a bit more of an effective ownership shield versus the playing opposition. At the same time, I've got to deal with Trippier on my bench, which a lot of people have been telling me is stupid, but I'm willing to be stupid this week just to try it out. Because I generally do believe that there's a good enough chance for Arsenal to get a clean sheet versus Newcastle, specifically because of the situation with Wilson not being fully fit, and then also Wood, just the level of Wood in general. But otherwise, of course, Newcastle have been a fantastic midfield and specifically defense. So that's kind of the tricky situation why I've also put Martinelli on the bench. Ah, it's tough though. Is anyone actually thinking of benching KDB? Just wondering, because I imagine a lot of people do have Mitrovic and Andreas in their teams. If you own Salah, obviously it's very obviously to play Salah this week, but I think this isn't a great fixture for KDB. The narrative there is, of course, that KDB used to be a Chelsea player and he loves doing well and performing, and he does perform well versus them. If you guys remember the free kick last season as well, wonderful player. But yeah, it's actually quite a tricky one to think about in terms of, you know, whether KDB is a good pick at this point, because it does seem like the ceiling of this team is actually higher when Foden plays, in my opinion. But Pep Guardiola does seem to disagree with that, because I think he maybe values control a little bit more than I guess the explosiveness that Foden might bring, attacking a defense. But you can see that KDB, when he plays with Grealish, I think what he usually finds himself positionally to be in is either to get assists through the usual set pieces that he can, but in terms of open play, it feels like he's passing more towards someone like Grealish, who will then actually cut back as opposed to shoot. So that's already kind of like the overall value of KDB when Grealish plays seems to drop, in my opinion. I don't actually have the data on that yet in terms of KDB and his impacts on the game from an FPL perspective versus when Foden or Grealish play, but that's kind of my intuitive sense of that. So it's a tough one there, but I played for KDB because, as I said, Newcastle's a very, very top defense. I still think they'll lose conceded goal, but I'm willing to bench Martinelli, hoping that maybe Odegaard or Saka are the ones scoring that goal versus Newcastle. And that obviously KDB will do well himself. Best under 6 midfielder, I think it's Almiron first, then Mitoma second. After this week. Obviously, Andreas this week is actually better than everyone. I've only got 2 double game week Chelsea player. I think that's fine. You could consider rolling. I think Darwin's a good pick. Mitrovic for Martial or Darwin? I'd probably go for Martial. Oh, you don't have Rashford. It's a tough situation. Is there any reason why you don't have Rashford? Can you not go for Rashford this week? Thoughts on Sterling? Fantastic pick, probably my second favorite captaincy. Shaw for a -4. I don't love it. Sorry, yeah. I just think double game, I think 2021 not so good. For a -4 as well, that's asking from a lot from Shaw, even though it is Bournemouth. Bench KDB for Almiron. No, I'd bench Almiron, I would say. I think I would go there. What do you think about Bueno for Cucurella to save money, then Odegaard in for Almiron? I wouldn't do it this week because, I mean, Odegaard versus Almiron, I don't really like taking Almiron out of your team, and then I don't think Odegaard's points value this week is that exceptional to be worth going out of Almiron. So and neither do I think is Cucurella's. So that's kind of my thoughts on that situation. Rashford for -4. Yeah, I think that's worthwhile. Generally, because I think Rashford versus Bournemouth is a potential killer game there. Bench Foden or Martial? I'd bench Foden, I would say. Bueno or Patterson? Are we talking about starting? I'd probably start Patterson. What do you think about Salah captain? I think it's very logical. If you don't have Mitrovic, I think it's probably the best captaincy option because not many people own Sterling either. And I think I would rate my captaincy options as Mitrovic, Salah, Sterling maybe equal, and then Haaland, Rashford probably also equal. Those are kind of my tiers. I don't love Andreas that much because I think it's a little safe. Of course, Andreas has gotten some great hauls so far, but I think the ceiling isn't that high. I mean, even Kepa is a good vice captaincy option as well. Probably a top 5, top 6 pick in terms of expected value. Rashford in for either Martinelli, Mount, Salah, Andreas, or Almiron. That's tough. Yeah, no, I can see your situation. It doesn't make sense to go Rashford this week. I'd probably roll in your situation, if I'm being honest, dude, man. Bench Cancelo, what do you think? I mean, who are you benching Cancelo for? Bench Adams for Wilson. No, I'd probably pay it. I'd probably play Adams because Wilson's situation is quite tough. He's not actually getting enough minutes. I think he's tired. He gets to play versus a very, very tough defensive team in Arsenal. I'd probably actually play Adams because, look, it's Nottingham Forest. Will Robertson play? I can't confirm that. I think he seems to be fine to play the next game, but not this game. You have Ward, Mount, Cancelo, Patterson. Should you start any of them? Yeah, I mean, you should be starting Mount. You should be starting Cancelo, probably. I would say Mount for Almiron is probably the one I would go for. Bench Cancelo for Trippier. I'd probably play Cancelo over Trippier, which is what I've done. But you can play Trippier if you'd like. Yeah, that's a good idea. I might actually move towards Twitter for a while. Oh, I don't know if should I be playing Martinelli? Oh, 15 minutes left, and I hate 50-50s. I'm gonna make a poll now, very quickly. Martinelli versus. If you guys could answer that question for me, that I would appreciate that. Cucurella or Cancelo? I'd probably play Cucurella first. Trippier, Cancelo, White. I'd probably play Cancelo, White, and then Trippier in that order. Pick one to start. Trippier versus KDB versus White versus Almiron. I'd probably pick KDB. Cap Holland or Salah? I'd probably pick Salah. Should I start White or Kanji? I'd probably start Kanji. Oh yeah, let's go on. I'll go on Twitter, but I'll only answer with my team selection facing you guys. Oh, it seems like most people are suggesting KDB start. Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think pretty regretful of Martinelli on the bench, but such is the state of play. I think I've got to go KDB. Tough. All right, that's fair enough. Let's go to Twitter anyways. So Ronick says, any suggestions? Willing to take a hit of -4, -8. So Rajan is going to include Andreas into his team. I wouldn't force Andreas for 1 week. You've already got enough coverage, in my opinion, because you already have Mount, who you've opted to go for. -4s for a double game week player that you're not going to be playing consistently in the future. I probably wouldn't justify that, sadly. Because I think you can just play the team that you have, Rajan. So is De Silva good long term? I mean, the last time he scored a goal, he was benched like the next 3-4 games. So I'm not really high on De Silva. I wouldn't say he's good long term, but neither is Andreas, because you'd probably be benching him most weeks after this one, because the fixtures for Fulham are very, very, very tough. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll there. Seems like most people value KDB starting. I don't know what to do. Okay. Hi from Thailand. Nice to meet you. Hi from London. What's your opinion on Rodrigo? His fixtures are good. I think Rodrigo's a good pick. I mean, he's on penalties. He's nailed. because we don't really know what's the issue with Bamford long term. So yeah, I think Rodrigo's a good pick. The issue with Rodrigo is he's dealing with a lot of competition because you've got enough quality players within Arsenal and Newcastle who are very, very cheap that makes Rodrigo seemingly not worthwhile because the Leeds team is overall quite poor. So that's my thoughts. Start Trossard or Martinelli. I'd probably start Martinelli. White or Patterson. I'd probably start White. Why do I have Martial over Darwin? Because I've gone for Trent Alexander-Arnold in my team and I've transferred him in. And that was the only way I could really go to Mitrovic whilst keeping Trent or bringing Trent into the team as well at the same time. Rashford or Kane captain, and why? I think Rashford, I think the fixture is much, much better for United. I think Rashford, higher ceiling probably as well, you could say. Good chance of keeping the clean sheet there. More value for a goal. Very, very good chances of getting goal scoring attempts this game. So as a midfielder in a perfect game, I think Rashford is better than Kane. Because a lot of people are considering Rashford over Haaland anyways, right? And this Tottenham team is pretty terrible. So Kane is getting very, very minimal touches on the ball. I think United will completely trample over Bournemouth. They're playing at home as well. So perfect fixture for Rashford to actually get a lot of opportunities. You saw what he could do in 45 minutes in the previous game, then 90 minutes in the previous. Yeah, I think Rashford is probably the best captaincy pick over Kane. Bench 2 out of White, Bueno, Trippier, and Cancelo. I'd probably bench Bueno and Trippier. Cancelo, a certain for the game week. Is it bad you leave them both out? I think Cancelo, no, because it seems like a lot of people have gone out of Cancelo anyways. As far as Mitrovic, look, of course, the worst case scenario can happen. He can get a yellow card. Is it terrible to miss out on him? I would say also no, because he's got Newcastle and Tottenham. But is he a great pick? Yeah, I think the reality is yes. Happy New Year to you as well. Hope you're doing well. Trippier over White for me easily. Yeah, I understand that. That's fine. You can play Trippier over White. A lot of people seem to be playing Trippier over White anyways. Mount as a captain option. I don't like it. I like Sterling as a captaincy option, but I don't really like Mount. Crazy to captain Shaw over Rashford. I'd much prefer Rashford than Shaw. I'd prioritize Rashford over Shaw. Captain Haaland or Mitro? I've gone for Mitro, as you can see. Robbo to Trippier. Yeah, I think that's a very logical pick. Not this week, though. I'd probably hold off on that transfer. Oh, I don't really know if I should move Martinelli onto my starting team. Feels a little bit regretful putting him on the bench. But I'd look even more stupid if De Bruyne did well versus Chelsea. The one nice thing that I like about KDB is that the Man City game actually comes after quite a significant period of rest. So that's kind of nice that it comes as one of the tail end games. And then Arsenal versus Newcastle happens so soon. My main concern with KDB was how fit he is, and he didn't look particularly good after the first 15-20 minutes versus Everton. So I like that he gets a few more days of rest. But yeah, it's a tough situation because City looked good, but I think not good enough versus Everton, which is the assessment. And then Arsenal versus Newcastle. Newcastle been fantastic. So I'm hoping that Newcastle can kind of keep that up. Because Newcastle, even if I cast my mind back to the Liverpool game, yes, okay, Liverpool, pretty terrible defense, but then when it comes to the offense, it's a good eye test, right, to see something like Newcastle versus Liverpool. We, of course, have also seen Newcastle versus City, which was an electric affair, and that was where Newcastle conceded 3. But since then, they've pretty much built better, much more consistent defensive results, even keeping a clean sheet in Old Trafford. So, yeah, probably going to drop Martinelli. And Chelsea just didn't look very good versus Nottingham Forest once again, which was my concern, because after playing Bournemouth, a lot of people do change their minds on teams. But at the end of the day, you're playing Bournemouth. So I think I'm going to bench Martinelli. What do you think from Liverpool? They could come back and get top 4, but I think that's it. I've already responded to Twitter, haven't I? Who haven't I responded on Twitter? If you can drop me a DM, I'd probably respond to you on Twitter. But I think I've responded to everything on Twitter anyways. Cap Holland or Havertz have Salah as well. I'd actually probably consider captaining Salah over all of them. Foden to Saka or Sterling, or keep Foden, bench Trippier. I actually like Foden to Trippier, to Sterling. Sorry, I quite like that move. Bench De Bruyne over Martinelli. Yeah, that's the decision that I'm dealing with myself on my own team. I prefer Martinelli, but I like KDB with rest, and I think if they both play 90 minutes, I'd probably pick KDB over Martinelli. Tough situation there, but yeah, I'm going with KDB. My main concern as well is that Saka might be the one to bench over Martinelli, just to actually protect myself versus Martinelli ownership. But then also the chances of Saka getting a penalty seem really appetizing to me. So yeah, and then I mean, what's the matchup, right? It's Martinelli versus Trippier. Trippier, I wouldn't say Martinelli is the fastest player, but then Dan Burn on the left, it's probably someone that Saka can blow by, hopefully. So I'm hoping that that's the kind of value and the utility of Saka this week. Def start KDB against weak Chelsea defense. Yeah, that's also a very fair point. As we said, the quality of the opponent isn't very high. Look, Chelsea still have accumulated terrible defensive statistics. Newcastle some pretty good ones. So yeah, seems to make sense. As a Gunners fan, yeah. Do you think Foden will start today after the draw to Everton? I think so. Why not cap Andreas? Well, because I've got Mitrovic, and I think Mitrovic has probably a higher ceiling than Andreas, even though he might have a little bit of a lower floor because of the potential suspension. But yeah, I like Mitrovic. Start Dunk or White? I'd probably start Dunk. Cancelo or Cucurella? Cucurella. So those are my kind of closing thoughts on the team. I don't think I'm going to change my mind on Martin De Bruyne. I think I'll keep it as it is. Obviously, you guys should make your decisions now as much as possible. I'm going to quickly double check on Twitter. There doesn't seem to be anything news. Is the Silva good long term? Nope. Seems like I've responded to everything, so apologies if I haven't been able to respond to anything there. Kind of hoping that Trent can keep a clean sheet and that I can start my game week pretty hot, because the Arsenal game would be quite painful for me as I don't have a lot of the top picks in that game. Like if Trippier and Martinelli somehow both pop off, I'm in a pretty bad situation. But something like Arsenal winning 1-0 with a Saka goal is beyond optimal for me. Hopefully that does happen, because I would have White as well. As far as Martinelli, yeah, and then I guess I think I'm just hoping that all my midfield bangs, because they've got great chances of actually doing well this week. And then Martinelli, KDB, a little bit of 50-50. And then Martial. I think Martial and Darwin's pretty close, because Martial, look, Bournemouth is such a bad team. You've got value there always when you play versus them, and then Mitrovic is a good captaincy. So I'm pretty happy with this team as it stands. Andreas White captain. I'm going White over Trippier. Yeah, I am. Got a cheer for Mitchell blank and yellow against Leicester. Fair enough. I appreciate me smashing it otherwise. But yeah. Start White or Trippier. I've gone for White. Bench Cancelo, I might be in trouble. Look, you'll be fine. So many people sold Cancelo last week and the last 2 weeks. And Cancelo's already pissed me off enough, so it's whatever, really. Who knows? He might be benched once again, and then I'll just get Trippier anyways, right? And then with Martinelli, I mean, I'm just going to have to hope Martial does well, because he might be another player I've regretted. Sterling, I think Sterling is great. Good luck with that. I really like Sterling as a captaincy punt. If I could go for Sterling reasonably without sacrificing De Bruyne like the way that I have, I probably would have done that. I guess I could have gone Sterling as well over De Bruyne. But then it's like double game week 20 on City seems to be on the cards. So what's the point of that? That's a tough situation. All right, guys, please lock in your transfers because obviously we've had so many deadline crashes this year. But thank you guys so much for watching today. We'll try to make sure that we can increase the quality of the live streams in the future, and then also with the videos too. My plans are to get back on track with the cheat sheet, and then to include expected points on the cheat sheet as well, and then probably bring to you guys preview videos now that we have some more time to develop content. So thank you guys so much. Have you guys have yourself a wonderful week. Please lock in your transfers, and good luck to whoever you've captained, whether it's Holland or a differential captain. And yeah, the season's long, so I'll see you guys soon. Take care, guys. Well, still actually a couple seconds. How many of you guys have actually taken a hit this week? I'm just curious, now that we've actually probably hit the deadline. Or is anyone rolling their transfer this week? Because the suggested idea from Ben Quellen was to actually roll the transfer so you can actually optimize for double game weeks 20 and 21 when you have more data from cup matches. Okay, yeah, we've got seemingly we've got a good mix of players who've done both options. Makes sense, Zachary, yeah. So you're also kind of optimizing for future double game weeks, I'm guessing. And then the Witch is also gone for a -4. 2 free transfers and a -4. That's really spicy there. I'd love to know what you've gone for. But you've gone for Sterling, I think. So that seems to be quite spicy. I hope that works out for you. Ideally, another Sterling solo goal game would be good. But yeah, I think I'm going to actually head back to bed because I'm pretty tired from my long flight. But I hope you guys have a wonderful game week, and I'll see you guys next week as well. And we'll provide as much content as you guys possible on Twitter and on YouTube. So thank you guys so much for joining the comeback stream. Please like and subscribe, and take care.